ultimately what it comes down to, and the whole purpose of this episode, is that if you establish a sense of authority in your target market among your target audience members, that you are the person who understands best the problems, the challenges that they're facing that they want to overcome, understands best what the solution needs to look like and how to implement it, how to personalize it for their situation. If they perceive you as the highest authority on this subject matter, then it is going to be hard for them to choose any other option. Welcome to Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors, the first and only show dedicated exclusively to helping entrepreneurial, growth-driven financial advisors book more discovery calls with qualified prospects every day of the week. I'm your host, Roy Furr, TheAdvisorCMO. Let's get into it. And we're back with your next episode of Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. I'm Roy Furr, TheAdvisorCMO. I am excited about today's episode because we're going to be talking about the owned authority marketing strategy for financial advisors. This is essentially how you become a subject matter expert to become more attractive to clients. So in this episode, this is kind of an in media res case study, a term from drama, in the middle of things, right? The Latin term, in the middle of things. And so this isn't like something that I have results to share with you about, but what I thought is I might share this story anyway to give you a sense of how my brain works as I'm going about creating marketing solutions for advisors and sharing with you specifically this marketing strategy for financial advisors that can help you establish expert positioning in your target market, attract clients as a subject matter expert, and give you owned authority as a long-term growth strategy. And so, ultimately, I think what it comes down to, and the whole purpose of this episode, is that if you establish a sense of authority in your target market among your target audience members, that you are the person who understands best the problems, the challenges that they're facing that they want to overcome, understands best what the solution needs to look like and how to implement it, how to personalize it for their situation. If they perceive you as the highest authority on this subject matter, then it is going to be hard for them to choose any other option when it comes to services like yours. And so the more you can take ownership of that authority for yourself, the more of a snowball effect this is going to have long-term in terms of making all of your marketing, all your advertising, any kind of sales activities, whether they're paid or free or whatever, all of that more effective, more successful, more profitable. So this episode, it's actually going to start with a little bit of a story. I'm going to keep all the details a bit anonymous, especially because this is a current conversation. So I was having a conversation with an advisor. It's a very successful company. They're up over $500 million in AUM, but they also want more growth. And when I was asking them about, where did they come from? Where are they going? How have they gotten clients up to this point? Their methods for getting clients have really come down to two main avenues. And those two main avenues are buying leads, which is essentially a hamster wheel. I mean, you're just buying leads. And it's great that it's been effective for them, but it is a hamster wheel that, if as soon as they stop paying, it's going to stop spinning and they're going to not have that client acquisition available to them. And the other main source of clients is referrals, which it's great. It's great that you're providing that high level of service to your clients, that they are happy to refer their friends to you, to talk about you to their friends, to their colleagues, to their associates, to their family members. But referrals are ultimately very hard to scale. It's limited by your current client base and their willingness to convey the message of the value that you provide. And there are certainly things that you can do to be more intentional about stimulating referrals, and having some owned authority strategies in place certainly would benefit that. But again, it's hard to scale. And so this financial advisor I was speaking to them because they want measurable, scalable growth. They're very interested in creating organic growth, as opposed to M&A activity where they're buying up other advisors' practices, buying up other advisors' books of business. They're very interested in creating growth where new clients are coming to them. New clients are raising their hand saying, I'm interested in speaking with you, and becoming clients that way, bringing their assets on board. Through things like lead generation, through things like client acquisition. They also want to feel more in control over their sources of new clients. So when you pay for leads, you are controlling it in a way because you're writing a check and the leads are showing up. But someone else is in charge of the demand generation. And if that person stops generating leads, then you're not in control over that flow of leads. Likewise with the referrals, you have limited control over that. Now, this advisor is smart. They're willing to invest in making it happen, but the missing link is they're not quite sure how, right? They're not sure how to actually put marketing, advertising, messaging, communication out in the marketplace that is going to drive that lead generation, that's going to drive that client acquisition. And so that's a big problem. How are they going to achieve it? Now, they were telling me they've tried things here and there. They're not sure what exactly to do or what works for any kind of repeatable, scalable acquisition beyond just, they can buy leads from that lead source and they can get referrals. And that's what they keep going back to, those main sources, buying leads and referrals. But they're basically maxing out the channels that they found to be successful so far. And, that's created that problem. So here's where this firm is at right now. They are undergoing a fairly big transition. There's some operational growth that's happened. They do feel really ready to scale from the operational side. From the marketing side, from the demand generation side, not so much. Alex Hormozi, really well known in the marketing world, entrepreneurial world right now, talks about most businesses are either supply constrained or they are demand constrained. Supply constrained means, we don't have the operational capacity to take on new clients. And so we need to build out our operations, our systems, our people. We need to build out our team. We need to build out operations to be able to handle new clients. If you are supply constrained, then that's not a marketing problem to solve. That is an operations problem to solve. On the other side of it, if you are demand constrained, what that means is that our advisors, our team, have extra time on their hands, and they could be using that time to speak to prospects, to speak to new potential clients, but they don't have enough new potential clients, prospects coming in the door. They don't have enough leads coming in the door for them to fill up their time and have all of those conversations. And so this team right now is much more demand constrained than supply constrained in this moment. And so now they're looking for lead generation and client acquisition strategies. And so it was just great timing for our connection because we could talk about that. Now, as I was going through, as I started asking questions, I had the simple realization. I had a realization that really distinguishes the marketing strategy that they could be using to generate leads versus what they've been using up to this point. So they've been doing a lot of things right regarding how to achieve growth, how to create growth, how to sell once those leads come in the door, once the people raise their hand, but not necessarily how to do the marketing. They're able to convert a lead. And I talk to so many advisors who have this same experience that, hey, you get that person across from me, you get that person talking to me, and I can do a pretty dang good job of talking to them about their needs, their wants, their desires, how financial services and my financial services could help them fulfill their needs, achieve their wants and desires. But I don't know how to get that person in that chair across from me. And that's the biggest challenge that they run into. And that was the case with this advisor as well. They're doing things right regarding growth, regarding growing the team, regarding the operations, and regarding selling. They just need more people in those seats. And as I was looking at what they were doing, and as I was considering what could happen next to be able to get those potential prospects in their seat, what I realized is that there's this big distinction between borrowed authority and owned authority. The leads that they're buying are leveraging the borrowed authority of someone else that has a positive reputation in the marketplace with their prospects. And they are borrowing, essentially they're buying the authority of that person who has that reputation in the marketplace with their prospects. What they have not done over the course of building up well over $500 million in assets under management, what they've not done with anyone besides their client base is taking ownership of their own authority and ability to get results and their own thought leadership in the marketplace for those clients. And so that distinction, this borrowed authority versus owned authority, for me represents a massive, massive opportunity for them in terms of defining the future of the firm and creating the next phase of even more sustainable growth and growth that they have much more control over. Plus, I also identified what I think of as a huge short-term opportunity for this firm that I will share at the end of the episode as well. And so this new opportunity that I've identified for them is this idea of creating owned authority. Now we can use different types of terms for this, right? Being an authority, being an expert, being almost a celebrity, because if you do marketing right, one of the things that happens is you get this sense of celebrity, or just being a subject matter expert, somebody that people happily turn to when it comes to that particular subject, in this case, financial services, right? The celebrity effect, I have a funny, interesting story. One of the clients I was working with, we were in their conference room for an all-day strategy session, and their conference room faced the lobby, and it had this big glass wall. So as people were coming in, not only did the conference room have a glass wall, but the office suite had a glass wall out to the main hallway where there was an elevator. And so as people were coming in, they'd get off the elevator, they would turn towards the office, and they'd be able to see into the lobby, and they'd be able to see into the conference room. And this particular advisor had a lot of face time in marketing and advertising. And you could see the moment that these prospects saw that advisor in the conference room speaking to us, their eyes would light up, because it's like, oh, that's the person that I see on my screen. That's the person whose voice is familiar to me. That's the person like who I see as essentially a celebrity when it comes to financial services. And then that celebrity is layered onto any kind of authority expert status that is developed through the content that's put out. That face of the firm has a celebrity status where there's this instant recognition and excitement by seeing them. And then beyond that, this advisor was telling us that, when these prospects come in, and he did it multiple times throughout the day, when these prospects come in, one of the things that he has to do, because it's other advisors who are primarily handling the relationship, one of the things that he has to do is he has to go into the meeting. He has to ask them a couple questions and essentially bless the relationship. And that's his term, not ours. He would bless the relationship of oh, you're in great hands here with this advisor because he's able to provide just this incredible level of service that we have created as a firm, as the processes that we have built into what we do. And so this celebrity status was able to get people to convert and made them more excited about coming into the office, made them more excited when they saw him, because of just this natural pull that we have as human beings towards people who have a sense of authority or recognition in a market. Now, I have an additional term that I want to pull in here, and it's this idea of what I call fiduciary marketing. and I'm going to put this in huge quotes because I recognize that the fiduciary standard in financial services is very different than what would necessarily apply in marketing. But fiduciary marketing is very much in alignment with, you may be familiar with him, Jay Abraham. He wrote Getting Everything You Can Out of All You've Got, as well as a number of other excellent books on business. And he's one of my, mentors from a distance. I've been at events, I've spoken with him, but he has this concept of the strategy of preeminence. And so this idea of strategy of preeminence or fiduciary marketing, to help give you a different perspective on it, is essentially that you treat marketing like a fiduciary activity, like a fiduciary role or responsibility. And that is, you are, and this is how you create this owned authority in the marketplace, and how you get people to really know, like, and trust and even revere you as the expert here. That in your marketing, what you do, and this is in alignment with the strategy of preeminence and what I'm calling fiduciary marketing. In your marketing, what you do is you essentially work to become and then to communicate expertise, expert status on the problems and challenges that they face. Why it is so important to address those problems and challenges. Why other solutions have fallen short in the past and could easily fall short for them if they try to apply those other solutions. What an ideal solution is going to look like, and then the action that they need to take to implement that solution. And so you become an expert. You become an authority on those different topics, and you communicate those through your marketing, not just to convert, because if you do this right, it is going to be very attractive to new potential clients, and they will come to you. They are more likely to convert. Not just to do that, but to help everyone who engages with your marketing and your advertising get the result that they want. Address the problem or challenge, address that, solve it, to understand how to make a good buying decision, whether or not they choose to do business with you in the future. And that's what makes it in alignment with the fiduciary idea that is core to Jay Abraham's strategy of preeminence, is that as you're putting out this marketing, as you're putting out education-based marketing that positions you as an authority expert, celebrity, subject matter expert on the topics of financial services and the specific, more specific target topics, as well as the more specific target audience that you speak to, as you're doing that marketing, you are trying to educate them to help them make sure that they make the best possible decision and fully understand the problems, challenges, and the solution, the buying criteria for a solution, whether or not that benefits you in the long run. And doing this and consistently doing this through time to your audience, everywhere that you can connect with them, creates this thought leadership position within the market. Now, thought leadership actually happens on a person-by-person basis. And so you can become a thought leader to the first 10 people, and then 15, 20, 25, 50, 100, 1,000, 10,000, your entire market. But you're looking to establish thought leadership by essentially putting their interest first and communicating, here's the challenges that you're likely to face. Here's the problems that we help people overcome all the time that many of them don't expect. Here's the roadblocks and the landmines that people run into. And then here's how to address them. Here's the important things that you need to understand in terms of addressing them. And you can do that with someone else, or you can do that with us. We have a process for that. But at the very least, you need to be aware of these problems. You need to be aware that it is the smart thing to do to put a solution in place that addresses these problems, help you prevent them in the first place or address them afterwards if they're starting to show up as issues in your financial picture. But we're going to address those problems and challenges, and I'm going to share with you exactly what needs to happen in order to make that happen, and then you can choose to get my help with that. And that's what really establishes that powerful thought leadership. And so I see this for this particular advisor and for so many other financial advisors as a new and really massive opportunity to create that sense of owned authority in the marketplace. Now, I want to give you some more specific guidance on how to establish authority as a financial advisor. And I have this broken down into a way that I like to think about marketing and that I like to think about really any kind of skill that you can develop. And that is, I break it down into different levels: principles, strategies, techniques, and tactics. And so I start with the principles, like Ray Dalio, right? Like I had this framework or model before the book Principles came out, but that book, like, boom, it's huge. So starting with the principle is going to dictate the strategy that you apply. The strategy that you apply has a series of techniques that are specific to how you would apply that strategy. And then tactics are on the ground, very specific implementations within specific technical context, within specific media context, et cetera. And so if the principle that we're operating from in order to establish authority is really that we're just looking to establish this thought leadership positioning, the major strategy that we're going to use, and I've been speaking to this already, is education-based marketing. Now, education and sales, education and persuasion, education and marketing do have a strong overlap. They are not completely overlapping. There are people who educate without selling, and there are people who sell without educating. But there is a strong overlap, and that is where I like to play. And that's where I think that most financial advisors would benefit most by focusing their marketing, their advertising efforts, is educating the market and then giving that person a logical next step to follow if they would like to figure out how to apply that in their personal situation. And so when it comes to education-based marketing, that is really what we're trying to do. We are trying to help people understand the problems, the challenges that they're going to need to address as their wealth grows, as they're looking to use the wealth as opposed to just accumulate the wealth, as they're entering different stages of their life, as they're going through specific life events. We're looking to educate them about the problems, the challenges that can come up for people going through similar situations, why it's so essential to address those and address those early, and what the solutions are going to look like. And then we're giving people an action that they can take. Now, there's some specific techniques that I have listed out here. Authority, positioning, and branding, really taking ownership of yourself as a thought leader in the marketplace. And that means, putting your face out there, putting yourself out there as an authority that's able to confidently deliver information, content on these particular topics. There are certain activities like writing a book, for example, that is a thing that people tend to do that makes them be perceived by the marketplace as an authority. In fact, you'll notice the overlap in language between author and authority. One of the most important things that you can do if you want to be perceived as an authority is to be an author. Now, to be an author in today's media landscape actually has, multiple meanings. And so getting onto a podcast or a video is a way of kind of being an author. But there is something enduring about the power of a book in particular that will help with your authority positioning and branding. And that's an example, right? But that helps. Having a diagnostic and prescriptive process around your service and around your sales activities is very helpful here in terms of thought leadership. And what I mean by that is that essentially you are functioning like a doctor, but a doctor for someone's money. So what that means is, as I'm speaking with you, as I'm figuring out where you're at in your situation with your finances, et cetera, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a bunch of questions. So it's a consultative selling approach. I'm going to ask a bunch of questions that really help me understand your relationship with the problems and challenges that I'm able to face or that I'm able to address, and that also help me understand if you are indeed a fit for our particular, we'll call it prescription or solution, right? And I'm asking all of those questions. And then at the end, assuming that you are a fit, and assuming that you resonate with the solving the particular challenges, the particular problems, then I'm going to make the prescription of you should go through this process with us. And that applies when it comes time to service delivery. It applies when it comes time to sales. All along the way, what we're really trying to do is, are you this particular person that has this particular challenge? If so, we have this particular solution built for you, and we would like to walk you through implementing that solution. And here's what that's going to take. And so it is again, a diagnostic and prescriptive process. You don't want to misdiagnose. You don't want to try and force your solution on the wrong person or someone who doesn't really face that problem. But if you can find the right person who has that challenge, that problem, and they want to address it, then you apply the prescription in that case. And that's a technique for establishing authority in the marketplace. Like, people follow their doctor's prescriptions. Hopefully, there are certain people who aren't necessarily as compliant with prescriptions, but the point is that this process of diagnosis and prescription makes it that people are predisposed to follow through. I have publishing here. I feel like I kind of pushed on that already, but in my notes, I have publishing. Authority equals author. That the more you publish in different media channels, the more you become seen as that authority. And so earlier I talked about the advisor whose face was often in advertising for the firm. Well, when that prospect comes in and sees that advisor, they are so positively responsive because that advisor was published in multiple media with their face associated with it. And so the more publishing you do, the more likely you are to be perceived as an authority. I was talking about how marketing and sales have a overlap, right? Well, here in my notes, I have content plus conversions marketing. And so when you think about educational content, you do want to put a lot of educational content out there. But there are a lot of people who put out a lot of educational content that don't drive any kind of measurable business results. And so you also have to think in terms of what is the conversion system that is going to move this person one step closer towards signing that client agreement. And so, for example, if you're putting out good content, one of the things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to give that person a next step at the end of the content to figure out how that content can apply to their personal situation through their work with a financial advisor. And there's going to be, the name of this show is Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. It is ideal if you have a branded discovery call process that aligns with the content. And so if you're talking about tax challenges, talk about a tax solution in the form of a discovery call, right? And having that specific next step and always thinking in terms of every piece of marketing, every piece of content that we put out, what is the next step that we want someone to take, and how can we make that as easy and obvious as possible without necessarily coming across as like a hard closer or anything like that, but by giving someone a natural next step that they can take if they've resonated with the message so far. It is your duty and your responsibility not just to tell someone, oh, here's this problem, here's this challenge, but to give them an opportunity to solve it, to give them the next step that they need to take towards the solution. And that's what the conversions part of content and conversions marketing is. And this is a big one. So Google did this research on zero moment of truth, which is this evaluation process between starting to, between receiving some kind of stimulus that indicates that they have a problem, a challenge that they need to have solved, or an advertisement that kind of points out something that they may want. There's a gap between that stimulus and between the response stage where they actually enter an active buying process, which would be coming in to visit with you, to speak with you, and have a conversation with you about maybe becoming a client and then moving forward there. There's this gap. And during that gap, which Google called the zero moment of truth, they will spend on average, for an average buying decision, 7 hours consuming content around that, either actively or passively consuming content, meaning they're either out researching it or it's just things that are showing up in their newsfeed, it's things that are showing up in various places, and they're just responsive to that and they pay some attention to it over the course of 7 hours, 11 touch points, and 4 separate media channels. And during that time is when you were building your authority with that individual. During those, and honestly, for financial advisors, it could be more time, more touch points. So they may spend 7 to, let's say, 14 hours really starting to get a picture of, okay, do I need to do something with my financial planning right now? And what might that look like? And what are the challenges? You get somebody reading a book and they could easily go well past 14 hours, right? If it's a substantial book, or they could read a number of different books. They could subscribe to a number of different podcasts. They could listen to quite a few different podcast episodes. They could watch some videos on YouTube. So you can see how those are different media channels. It's different touch points, and it's more and more time spent. And you have an opportunity here to do something called relationship marketing or database marketing, where you are nurturing that buying decision-making process, that 0 moment of truth, the evaluation stage between stimulus and response, where you are consistently putting out content, valuable education-based marketing that is designed to drive a conversion, get them to raise their hand and say, yeah, I'm ready to speak with an advisor whenever they are ready, right? But you are consistently doing this relationship marketing to the database of people who've previously expressed interest in you. And that is really your biggest opportunity. That's a massive opportunity to establish this authority positioning on repeat at really a fairly low cost, because there are production expenses and time expenses associated with, for example, putting out a podcast or doing a YouTube channel or just emailing your database on a regular basis. But the incremental cost of marketing to additional leads in all of those different places is so low. And the return can be so high, because the more people that you have in your database, the more people are starting to know, like, trust, and revere you as a financial advisor, as an authority on financial planning topics. And so as a technique that's wildly effective in establishing authority with your audience. Now, I have some more specific tactics here. So, for example, productized services. Actually, if you want to be an authority, you probably have a process that defines your authority status. You have a way that you do things, a way that you solve that particular problem that you've put together because you believe your way of solving that problem is better than the alternatives out there. And so establishing authority, you have a core process, a core service that you follow, whether you say it or not. And to essentially take that core service, the things that you do, and put a wrapper around them, give them a name, explain to them as part of your education-based marketing, explain to your prospects what it is that you do and the name that you have for it, that makes you perceived as more of an authority. And like I was saying with the discovery calls as well, giving a name to your acquisition process, which could be some kind of strategy session, right? Typically a topic-specific strategy session, or a broader, retirement financial strategy session. That's a terrible naming. You might want to add your brand to it or something like that. But to productize that service so that it feels unique to you and it feels like you have a process, because they will trust you more if they perceive that you have a process. And often the difference there is naming it and explaining it. Doing weekly emails and blog posts. Fairly simple place that you can become an author, that you can establish authority, is publishing consistent emails that are content plus conversions, education-based marketing, out to your audience, as well as doing those same pieces of content often as blog posts. And they don't have to be real substantial and they don't have to be real salesy, but it should be, what little piece of that, what nugget of value can I consistently provide to the people who have given me permission to contact them in the future for marketing, for talking about financial services, right? What little nugget can I provide about taxes, about retirement income, about recent changes to laws and regulations that may apply to them, observation, insights, and perspectives on what the market is doing, how their financial plan is pre-built to stand up against that. Things like healthcare and medical expenses during retirement, long-term care expenses, how their retirement savings are going to be handled in the context of their estate. Lots of different topics that you can talk about, right? Just consistently put out little nuggets of value over and over again and offer people a next step. Doing webinars and presentations, video-based presentations, or heck, doing in-person presentations. It's a tactical way that you can apply this education-based marketing. Teach, but also give people an opportunity and a reason to respond at the end. Reports, guides, lead magnets. Again, it's just different media, but the idea is the same, that we're providing some valuable content that attracts the right kind of person by talking about a problem, a challenge that they're likely to face, the symptoms maybe that they're experiencing of that problem in their life right now, and then giving people a direction to take for understanding that problem, understanding why that problem exists, why it can be so challenging, why putting off addressing that problem, the challenge, is not the smart thing to do, what they need to do when it comes to solving the problem, and how they can take action with you to help them implement that solution. YouTube, podcasts, different kinds of media that you can put out there. All of these are just different tactics that you can apply to help establish authority as a financial advisor. If you have somebody who's been watching the same financial advisor's content over and over and over and over and over and over again on YouTube, or listening to that same podcast, listening to that advisor talking about their process, their team, all of that, how much of an authority is that person going to perceive that advisor to be? Even if it's not, on TV or something, when they've seen that person's face on YouTube over and over again, how likely is it that the prospect there, the potential client, when they see their face in person, is going to light up? How likely is it that they're going to be excited to see that advisor, perceive them as an authority and even a celebrity, right? Very likely. Hint. Also, another tactic here is using paid and earned media to drive traffic. And so this can apply in lots of different ways. I don't want to go too deep into paid and earned media here, but if you want to establish authority as a financial advisor, if you have for example, this is one thing that you can do on YouTube, a sequential video campaign set up where as soon as someone watches video ad one, they then become part of the audience for video ad 2, and YouTube will show that to them. And then they become part of the audience for video ad 3, and YouTube will show that to them. And 4, 5, 6, 7, however many videos it is, well, they're going to start to have that recognition and be much more likely to click and respond, especially if you follow the stats and do a little optimization of that campaign. But then that person is more likely to engage in longer media down the road. They're more likely to then request an appointment, click through, etc. Earned media is similar, except for it's based on essentially earning the permission of an algorithm or an organization to have your media appear. So, for example, just putting free content on YouTube. If we're going to use the YouTube ads as one example for paid media, putting free content on YouTube, you have much less control over who sees it and when, but it is a way to drive traffic towards you. It's a way to push conversions into your system. And so, a lot of content there on how to establish authority as a financial advisor. I hope it gives you the sense that there are many ways to do it, and you're going to want to find the media that works best for you. For example, like if you just don't feel comfortable on camera, or you don't feel comfortable on a podcast having a conversation, you can still sit down and you can write consistent articles, and that can still be a very effective way to have authority as a financial advisor, right? You have to figure out what's going to work for you. Now, potential challenges in pulling this off, and here I'm more thinking back to the advisor that I was speaking with, it does require commitment to implementation. And I guess this applies to everybody, right? It requires commitment to implementation. So this is not just I'm going to do this and I'm immediately able to turn off all my old sources of paid leads, right? For example, if paid leads have been a significant source of bringing new clients in, you're not going to be able to just say, okay, tomorrow I'm an authority, right? There's a commitment to implementation. There is a process that has to be followed. Some of these things, especially, for example, if you're not paying for the advertising, but instead you're trying to earn the blessing essentially of the YouTube algorithm or the podcast discovery network's algorithm, or different places where you're actually earning media, it's going to take some time to pay off. And so if you're thinking about this in terms of a long-term strategy, it really does help if you also have a way to set up a short-term payoff. So the good news with this client in particular, and by the way, the short-term payoff could be, hey, we're just going to start paying for ads and we're going to start developing authority one respondent after another, right? And that can be a great short-term payoff. But one of the pieces of good news from this particular advisor, and I think a lot of advisors are in a similar situation, especially if they have been buying leads in the past and they're sitting on a bunch of leads who were less responsive then, who were less ready to move forward then, who just didn't convert then. This advisor does have a database of thousands of past leads who were responsive to the idea of talking to a financial advisor in the past. And not only that, they have some level of experience of communication with this particular advisor. So there is a sense of brand recognition, of name recognition. And so this is the huge short-term opportunity that I referenced earlier, is that we can immediately start doing database marketing. And there's a lot of advisors who I've spoken with who are in a very similar situation. No matter how they're getting front-end leads, how they're getting new clients, they have this huge database of people who recognize them, who know them, who they have permission to contact again, who are an immediate audience that they can speak to with this published content that they can use to drive engagement with the published content. And if that published content is effectively created in order to push conversions, to drive conversions of people raising their hand and saying, hey, yeah, now is actually a better time for me to speak with you about my financial situation, about my plan, about my retirement, et cetera, then it can be a really effective way to get short-term results. A challenge that you're going to run into with anything like this is that it does need to be warmed up. And so there are certain things that you want to do, especially if you haven't been contacting these people with any regularity, to make sure that you don't end up in spam world with your emails, especially for email marketing. You can also do database marketing via other channels like direct mail, where it is less dependent on spam, but that requires you to be able to, for example, be able to pull mailing addresses based on people's phone numbers, et cetera. Anyways, need to warm up the database. You can create a reactivation offer, ways to get people to raise their hand, express interest again, maybe get people even to opt in again. And the potential results, like if this is successful, I mean, one of the advisors that I've worked with, they said that out of all new business in any given calendar year, only 1/3 of that business is coming from new leads. The other 2/3 of their business, and this was $500 million a year in production, the other 2/3 of that business is coming from people who first entered their database, entered their system, at least in the prior calendar year. And so that prior calendar year audience really is your audience for database marketing. And when you have consistent programs in place to continue to communicate with those people, number one, there's huge potential opportunity in driving results from that. And number two, what you're doing is you're making everything you're doing to acquire new leads more profitable in the long run, because those new leads are then going to continue to be communicated with, to the point that if they're not ready to become a client today, they are much more likely to become a client at some point in the future, because you've managed to stay top of mind through this consistent communication. So I hope this has been valuable. Again, like this, we got into the weeds with the specific tactics of creating owned authority, like the authority, not just paid leads where you're buying somebody else's authority, the results of someone else's authority, but owned authority where you're doing all these things to help people know you better and better. And in getting to know you better, they become more likely to respond to your marketing. And so to wrap up this episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, hit the notification bell, all that stuff, everything so that you get more content like this delivered to you. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Roy Furr. That's ROYFURR. At Roy Furr or TheAdvisorCMO on LinkedIn. And I do actually, in addition to the podcast, I do daily marketing memos for RIAs and financial advisors, which you can find at TheAdvisorCMO.com/memos. That's TheAdvisorCMO.com/memos. I'll include a link in the description with this episode. Again, I'm Roy Furr, the Advisor CMO. This is daily discovery calls for financial advisors. And if you really do establish yourself as a subject matter expert, authority, even celebrity expert in your market, you won't have much trouble at all generating those daily discovery calls that are the mission, the promise, and the goal of this podcast. And so I hope you found this valuable. I look forward to speaking with you again in the next episode. I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Daily Discovery Calls for Financial Advisors. If you got value from this episode, I'd absolutely love it if you do me the favor of sharing it with one other person who you think would also find it valuable. It's how the show can grow and how I can keep bringing this value to you. And if you want to learn more about how you can book more discovery calls with your ideal clients, go to theadvisorcmo.com/podcast.